Hi, I'm Dave McGriff. I'm a sports and entertainment lawyer based in Los Angeles, and welcome to episode 2 of NIL Active. Today, we're excited to welcome Steve Simmons of NIL-Partners, and he's going to tell us a lot about what it is that they do and what value they can lend to student athletes. Steve, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into this space?
Yeah, sure. I was the shortest and heaviest D1 rower at my university's good old Colgate's rowing team. Mm-hmm. And, my partner has been with the Chicago Blackhawks organization for the better part of 20 years now, Pete Hassan. And when the NIL ruling came down, like everyone else, we looked at it and said, we've got ties to athletes, we've got ties to brands, let's figure something out here. And once we started seeing all the vultures coming out of the woodwork and, everybody has got a deal for some kid, through McDonald's or Gatorade and nonsense, we realized, no one's really looking out to protect these kids, right? And, we look back as athletes, we look back at everything we've seen with professional athletes and said, no one's really giving them the education, right? No one's helping them. And if we're in a situation now where you've got professional athletes making $20, $50, $100 million and then going bankrupt, living in their car, going to prison, you name it, what do we expect of these, man children and women children, if you will, at 18, 19, 20 years old? How are they going to do any better? So, we decided we wanted to focus on creating an educational platform with real life helpful guidance, and not just, taught by us, but taught by their peers, taught by professional athletes, taught by business school professors and entrepreneurs, people they can relate to. And, lo and behold, that's where we are now. And we're getting ready for the full rollout. We'll be working with a ton of schools really fast now.
That's great. That's great. So specifically, what kind of, how would this take form? You're going to be providing webinars to people. You're going to have people come in, have localized seminars around the country. What is that kind of looking like?
So it's a hybrid model. Our core model is an online educational platform made up of videos that are, anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes long, taught by, here's, Zach Banner from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's talking about how to utilize your social media platform for good, right? Build a foundation off of it, leverage your social network. So we have 35, 40 modules that are done. We've got God knows how many more in the works right now. And all this has been driven by athletic directors and professional athletes saying, God, I wish I would have known this ahead of time. If somebody would have told me this is brilliant. In conjunction with that, we go to the universities and we walk these kids through what these opportunities are, because it's not just about capturing a corporate sponsor. It's about capturing the attention of your corporate recruiter, because NIL is not 4 years, it's 40, okay? And I'm putting up 4 fingers like I can somehow put up 40 fingers, but it's 40 years, right? Everything you're doing, you're building the brand of you, and you're trying to capture the attention so that, God bless it, you get a small deal from your local T-shirt factory or whatever it may be, but let's focus on getting the attention of a corporate recruiter for when your playing days are over.
Right. And I love that phrase. It's 40 years, not 4. You as a D1 athlete and probably folks that you've talked to and know, what kind of advantage do you think it gives that person on the marketplace, the fact that they were an athlete, they had to juggle being both an athlete and a student?
We're asking so much of these kids these days, and I call them kids, because they're in a lot of cases more than half my age. In fact, maybe a third of my age, which I don't want to get into, but that's fine. But I know if somebody came to me when I was rowing and I'm living in upstate New York, and somebody says, hey, I'm going to give you $5,000 on a Friday, by Monday, I'd probably owe $20,000. I don't know what I'm doing. I still, to this day, I'm probably not the best with money. Mm-hmm. But at least we can use cautionary tales and be able to say, hey, here's what we know. All right. And again, being able to draw on the people we're working with, being able to draw on NFL athletes, NHL athletes, women's volleyball players and professional golfers, people who have been in this and understand it, or more important, people who've been close to it and had something happen where they couldn't make that leap to pro. and how they handled not just the mental come down from it, but also how they handle, now what do? You've spent 18, 20 years building up to this point. Now what? What do you do when you grow up, for the lack of a better word?
Right.
So we're really focused on trying to provide real cautionary tales that we can point to and say, listen, I'm not telling you what to do with your money, but we can tell you who you should be talking with because they know, they've been there.
Right. So in some certain ways, you're educating. You also are acting as a intermediary between your company and the folks who can directly provide resources to the kids.
Absolutely. We try to keep it agnostic. We're not going to come out there and say, hey, you need to work with these, this brokerage house or this, law firm or whatever it is. We can just say, you know what, you want a money manager. You don't want your uncle, who lives down the street from you being the guy who's going to handle your finances. We don't want, just because, you've got a buddy who opened up an LLC online, let's figure out the best path. Let's have real professionals wherever possible get in front of this and be able to help you and help you avoid any pitfalls.
Right. And in your experience so far in the space, is there anything in particular that you find that brands are looking for when it comes to student athletes? Because that's a question that I've been getting. In fact, I got it just this morning. What are they looking for? What do they want? How would I be attractive to a brand and getting an NIL deal?
Dave, that's a great question. And I make it a point of saying I've got a face for radio, right? I'm not the guy the brands are coming to going, we need this guy, right? Mm-hmm. There's this misconception that you have to have 50 or 100,000 followers on social media. You need to be the Heisman candidate, right? There are kids, if you look anecdotally, right, during last year's March Madness tournament, right? The kid from, was it St. Mary's? Doug Edert, I believe his name is. Here's a kid probably not going pro. Nobody really heard of him outside of his circles beforehand, but man, put up a show and he had personality, right?
Right.
There were numerous memes made from his faces. There were cheerleaders who, dislodged basketballs that got stuck in the backboards. They all received small deals because they showed personality and character. And that's what these brands want, right? They want a really sharp brand ambassador, somebody who, one of the big things we talk about when we talk to some of these sponsors is, they don't want headline risk. They don't want to wake up on a Monday morning, open up the paper or open up Twitter and go, our guy is all over the news and it ain't pretty, all right? And, the first thing we tell these kids is simply, what happens on social media stays on social media, right? This is beyond what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. This is your every move is captured somehow, and it's not going to go away. So how you carry yourself is everything. We worked with Becca Wathen, who was a Duke All-American, played for a cup of coffee in the WNBA. And now she's over at Meta heading up athlete partnerships. And she's made it clear, obviously if you have a big following, that helps a lot, but how you utilize the specific technology, whether it's on Facebook or Meta, if you will, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, how you're putting your stuff out there and how you're creating fan engagement is everything, because that's what the brands want to see.
Right. So one point I wanted to discuss that you brought up about our guys in the news and it's not good, right? So I've negotiated, just in this first year, negotiated a bunch of deals, and the vast majority of them have some kind of morals clause in them that says, if you do anything that's shocking to the society or,
right.
Anything, obviously if you're arrested for something, particularly a felony or something like that, then we have in our discretion, we could cancel the deal, right? And that we all kind of get, right? But one thing that I was looking at is we have this sense, I think, in general public, a commingling or a conflation of NIL and pay for play, and where they're saying, well, it's just pay for play, right? I've been on the side of that it's not pay for play; it's a separate right that they're granting and getting compensated for. Okay, that's been my position. But what I'm concerned about is one of these big name quarterbacks who signs a large NIL deal before the season or even during the season, and then goes out and has a really bad game. And then people want to hold that NIL deal over his head and say, yeah, see, he's not worth the money they spent on this NIL. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's really interesting, right? We look at it a couple of ways. I believe, and I apologize, but I believe it was the kid who's quarterback at LSU just walked away.
Right.
And he just signed a few deals and decided he's just not playing anymore. And you know what? He's going to get those deals. Now, the sponsors may be kind of a little unhappy about that, and there may be some backdoor negotiations now to work a way out. But, that's the exact answer to whether it's pay for play. He's not going to play this year.
Right.
Now, the reality is, kids are going to have a bad game, right? Female golfer is going to go out. She might be number one in the country. She's going to have a bad round. You don't win every tournament.
Right.
And we're putting this pressure on these kids, and it's why we have such an emphasis on mental health well-being, because if you look at Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles from last year, right? You look how fast so many people turned against them saying,
crazy.
What do you mean you're not going to participate? This is your job. This is what you do. And no one's sitting there saying, if Simone Biles doesn't have her A game, she can get killed out there missing a flip or God knows what. And somehow, it's our entertainment, right? This is Gladiator. Are you not entertained?
Exactly.
So you have to look at it and say, are we doing a proper job making sure they're in the right mental component to be participating at the highest levels? And for that matter, when do you know to walk away from social media and recognize, you know what? You had a bad game. You're going to hear about it. And you know what? If you had a good game, you're still going to hear about it because the other team and their fans are still going to ride you.
That's right. That's a good point. That's a really good point. So I agree with that, with your position. And I think we kind of see it similarly in terms of whether it's pay for play, separation of pay for play and NIL. But let's say that we're talking about, I think at the beginning, NIL was everyone was focusing on football and basketball because those are two of the more popular sports, the revenue-producing sports.
Revenue-producing sports, man. Yeah.
Right. So, but what about the other sports? What kind of action are you seeing for the rowers, the baseball, softball, volleyball, some of these other sports that I'm a big fan of, and I'm a big fan of soccer. It's not big in this country. What kind of things are you seeing? What kind of opportunities are you seeing for student athletes in those other sports?
Well, I think we're seeing a couple things right now, which is really interesting. First and foremost, I think when you take the misogyny out of college sports, I think you're seeing that women's basketball and women's volleyball are not that far behind in terms of sponsorship. There are a lot of female gymnasts like Olivia Dunn who are absolutely crushing it, just crushing it out there.
She's killing it. Yeah, she's killing it.
And I think what's happening is you have a combination of things, right? You have this wonderful conflux of it's the 50th anniversary of Title IX. So there's this awareness, right? Of, hey, these female athletes are fierce. I will put any women's rower against just about any athlete in terms of pure athleticism and the amount of effort they put into things.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, everything, follow the money, right? Who's the revenue generators? That's where the money is. But a lot of these brands are starting to get smart and say, you know what? This, University of Texas women's rowing team has won the national championships back to back, which is pretty much unheard of in the sport. Right. And odds are pretty good. You're not going to get any headline risk from these girls. A lot of them are going out for the U.S. national team. They're a strong program, and they look good for sponsors. And a lot of sponsors are getting creative, saying, you know what? We want to be a part of that. And I do think, and, you can wear your legal hat on this one, I think Title IX is going to creep into this more so as these opportunities come around. If it's not being handed out in a fair manner, and I know it's a free market, economy, if you will. And, brands are going to say, we want to get behind this team because they're going to draw the most eyeballs. At some point, if things are being passed up and they're missing these opportunities, there may be some issues. And it's unfortunate because some of these women present so well, and it's been shown that on social media especially,
Yes.
they resonate so much better with their fans in terms of fan engagement and sponsors because they truly engage. And it's there's a way of carrying a certain amount of swagger, but also they're typically more intimate in the way they let people in, like, hey, we're all waking up at 4 a.m. to go to practice, or it's a travel day, this is what we're eating for breakfast. Like, that's the kind of engagement that people really want.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I read something recently that if you take out football, women and men are earning around the same amount of money, closing around the same type of deals, and maybe women even outstripping them just a little bit. And one thing I read is that women tend to be more responsive, and they tend to be more diligent in pursuing deals and actually getting them closed. They're just more responsive. That's what one brand partner said, that
Absolutely.
They actually preferred working with female athletes because they tend to be more responsive, just more on the ball and getting their deals done. And that's a great thing.
It's a great point. One of the things we've seen is when you take away, call it the marquee athletes in, your core revenue sports, right? The guys who are pulling in 6 and 7 figures and then some, the attitude, the egos there, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they're not looking at these smaller deals. But a lot of the athletes at the next tier, if you will, the female athletes, they're hungry, right? They see what can be done, and they're the biggest advocates. And that's the main thing we're trying to teach these kids is, man, you've got to be your own cheerleader. You got to be your voice and build your brand, right? Because you can see it. Again, the Cavender twins, Olivia Dunn, like, look what they're doing out there, right? They've got clothing lines, they've got deals left and right, and they're perfect role models for other athletes coming up. Chase Griffin, the quarterback from USC, he's killing it, and he's not even the starting quarterback, but it's how he carries himself both on and off the field. And that's such a big thing because that's what the sponsors want to see. How do you carry yourself on and off the field? There's a fine line between swagger, but then there's also humility and empathy goes a million miles further.
That's right. And it's interesting you talk about Chase and that he's not the starting quarterback, because I was having another conversation with someone this week where I was talking about the difference between someone who is really active on social media, really engages with folks on social media, and how that person could be more marketable, more appealing to a brand partner than the starting point guard or the best pitcher on the softball team. Like, it's really, some of these brands are really looking for how much bang they're going to get for their buck, and a lot of that has to do with the outreach and how much presence the person has on social media. Absolutely.
And again, numbers are always great. Listen, you have 100,000 followers, God bless, right? But it's what you're doing with it, because the other side of it is you have 100,000 followers, you don't have that level of intimacy with all of them, right? You're not engaging with individual fans more often than not. But when you see these videos that get posted of, like the whole team, warming up before a game, and it's the women's volleyball team, and a little girl comes over and just wants to shake hands or hand the ball back to a girl or something like that. Like, those moments when you're engaging with little fans, the little kids don't know who you are.
That's right.
Whether you're going pro, they just see you as you're this like big star athlete, right?
Yep.
When you capture those kind of moments, you have that engagement with them. That goes a long way for sponsors.
That's right.
And that's something we love seeing that. And listen, I point it out every time I can on the pro side. When you see, I forget, I think it was just 2 weeks ago in Buffalo, I think it was Stephon Diggs, literally walked into the stands to break up a fight between two guys who were both Buffalo Bills fans.
I think it was
with each other.
Yeah.
And like, these guys were so engaged with each other, they didn't even recognize that he had literally climbed into the stands. All of a sudden, they're both like, "Damn, man!" So
I think one of them was even wearing his jersey.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of thing where you take a key from that and go, listen, that engagement, something like that, that's golden for a sponsor to look at that moment and be like, here's our guy doing the right thing.
Right. And I think that leads to another point about how NIL was expected to be this thing that only Power Five conferences were going to really take advantage of. And we saw last year that the largest, Raekwon, I think it was Raekwon Smith, was Mr. NIL, and he wasn't Power Five. So, and that's the case, I think, across the board, because there are college towns all over the country where that fan base is rabid, and anything about that college they want a piece of. So
absolutely.
For example, like the Dayton Flyers, Wichita State before they moved to one of the Power Fives, Loyola Ramblers. Those basketball teams, rabid fan bases, selling out every game, right? But they're not Power Five. They're mid-major schools. But the advantage they have with that fan base and how the players can be marketed to those fans in that area of Ohio, of Kansas, Missouri, that is something that is really appealing to the brand partners.
Well, and that's such a great point. And again, I'll point to my own alma mater, Colgate. We're in the middle of upstate New York, school of 2,800. They live and die with hockey season up there. Mm-hmm. And, I remember when I was up there, I'm dating myself, but, we went to the NCAA finals against University of Wisconsin. We're a tiny school. There were people who were standing outside the arena in, sub-zero weather because they were playing the game, so you could hear it outside.
Right.
Because that's what they have. And you have so many little towns like that. That's why we love D2 and D3 schools.
Yes.
Because NIL, at the end of the day, it's all about elevating the playing field, right? Yes. Everybody can benefit. Look at the HBCUs. I'm telling you, they're going to be shining stars this year. There's so many opportunities.
Absolutely. And again, it's about that targeted marketing. I mean, Black consumers make up a huge part of the base in the United States. They have for generations. And, why not take advantage of that? Why wouldn't brand partners be happy to engage with HBCU athletes because they know their reach and they know what type of engagement they get?
Well, listen, it's just a matter of time before bands from the HBCU start getting sponsored, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think I don't know if Grambling's was, but
Grambling was, yes.
Listen, they provide a ton of entertainment. These shows alone are worth going to the games, right? And these folks are hungry, right? Yeah. And there is that chip on the shoulder because they're always overlooked by the Power Five or whoever it may be. Mm-hmm. So you have this again, you have a loyal fan base. You have a loyal consumer base, right? So we're going to see more of this. And I think it's important, but the key is educating and helping these kids understand how to prepare themselves, how to present themselves, and how to get these opportunities.
Right. And your company is one of the companies that is doing that for student athletes. And I really applaud that because, as I always say, that there's so many student athletes out there. People talk about D1, but there's D2, D3, NJCAA. There's all sorts of student athletes out there. They all have this opportunity, and they all need guidance. And there's only, a limited number of people who can provide that guidance.
Well, if you think about it, literally overnight, a whole industry was created for universities. Now, once you get past, I'm not trying to pick on the Power Five by any means, but they have the means to bring on an NIL team in-house, right? They have those resources. We saw at the NACTA conference in Vegas, the athletic directors conference, one of the big issues is the battle between resources and access, right? It's very hard if you're a school, and again, I can pick on my alma mater all day long. You're 4 hours from any major city. How are you going to attract and pay for talent that wants to stay in town and be mental health therapists for the team, who can be NIL advisors? It's very hard. So you have to rely on your network of alumni and other folks. And that's why for us, we're coming out there saying, listen, we've got a big reveal coming up, but we don't think schools should be paying for this kind of education. We're relying on sponsors. So we're going to be rolling out and making sure that these schools have these resources and can reach out, because we're not brokers, right? We're not trying to broker the deals between the athletes and the brands. Mm-hmm. We want to prepare them and make sure that all the content is evergreen, right? So silly stuff that, we as quote unquote adults understand now, but didn't know when we were kids. Why you don't open up 5 credit cards your first day of school because somebody's, waving a logo shirt to you that you can buy in the bookstore, right? What is a credit report? Why does it matter? How does it, affect you moving forward? Stuff that is important to these kids. One of the things at the NACTA conference, we heard an athletic director from, a very reputable school explaining that any deal, as long as it's any deal as long as it's under $10,000 does not need to be reported for tax purposes, right? So you look at this and say, here's the AD saying this to these kids, right?
That's scary.
Yeah. And in fairness, listen, you've asked these ADs overnight to become tour guides, brokers, finance, professionals, you name it.
Yeah.
And they're sitting there going, listen, I'm just trying to get my team together.
Right.
So I can't fault them, but there is a lot of confusion out there about what's going on. And our job, and we're partnering with some great folks, is to just be able to help get that level of education out there.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Steve. So we're wrapping up our time. How can people get a hold of you? First I want you to, if you can, just give like a 60 seconds pitch to any student athletes out there as to why they need you and then where they can reach you.
Well, first and foremost, again, thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me kind of preach this gospel. We're passionate about this, right? Our job is to provide the cautionary tales and help these kids. And that's why, at no point are kids being charged for anything that we're trying to do. We're focused on the corporate sponsors. We're focused on the collectives. We're focused on the folks who have a vested interest in these kids, but are the ones who are going to put their money where their mouths are to help, right? We want to make sure we can give them all the tools to set up things like a dynamic web page where they can download highlight reels. And if they're selling their own clothing line or whatever, they can do it right from the site, and it's got a Shopify plugin. Everything's plug and play for these kids. All the education meets the education requirements they're supposed to have for NIL education or financial literacy education.
Right.
We're working with the schools. We have several conference commissioners who are serving as beta testers for us to get everything so it's just what these kids need. But, as far as reaching out to us, I'm told I'm on Twitter a little too much apparently, but it's what I do. So, at Twitter, we're at NIL-Partners. Y'all can reach me directly at ssimmons@nil-partners.com. Our website is nil-partners.com. We're out there. Y'all can call, reach out anytime. We're here to answer questions. We're working with a lot of the collectives to try to help them do things the right way. I think that's an area that, that's a whole separate podcast, just talking about the whole 501c3 aspect of it.
Right.
It's a big thing, and it's something that we talk about. Besides the financial literacy aside, the mental health well-being is so important for these kids. And also the ability to use your platform for good, right? Whether it's launching a foundation, whether it's just setting a good example and being a good steward of your school, of your community, whatever it may be. But there's all these opportunities to elevate yourself because you're in that spotlight. And it doesn't matter if you're the Heisman candidate or if you're, the 12th and a half man, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
You have this opportunity. And at the end of the day, corporate sponsors are great. Corporate recruiters are better, right? That's there's a reason one of the biggest accounting firms in the country reached out and said, give us a screen on every D1, D2, and D3 athlete who's an accounting major, because 99.8 of them, I'm not going pro. We want first dibs. We want to see them. We want to see who can carry themselves. You're able to follow orders. You're a team player. You can multitask. If you're running a brand and you're compliant, God bless. If you're engaging with fans, all these are skills that are, so in demand and so easy to monetize. So, God bless it. Chase the NIL buck where it is, but keep your eyes on the future that's really what matters.
Yeah, that's it. That's great. That's a great way to put it. I really appreciate your time, Steve. Thank you for coming on. Maybe we'll have you on again later after you guys have not announced your launch.
Absolutely, yeah. We have a few big things coming up, so we'll be really happy to share. And really appreciate the opportunity once again. Thanks for helping preach the gospel here.
All right, thank you. Take care, Steve.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for episode 2 of NIL Active. Be on the lookout for future episodes. Take care.